Buonasera a tutti, good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo, grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. So today I'm very delighted to have two amazing guests with us, and the conversation is probably going to make you really hungry really fast, but it couldn't be otherwise when we have Katie Parla and then Pashman joining us to talk about what they've been up to and what are cooking in their kitchens, not literally, for the next coming months, and where you can catch them either in the US or in Italy. Ma prima pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring in person or online to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at istitutomondoitaliano.org. Wow, that is such an amazing combination of having both Katie and Dan together, even because not only do I respect and follow what they do individually, but they're going to come together to you in November. And today we're going to discover everything about what is in their plans. But I don't take anything for granted, and I'm going to actually pass the microphone, so to speak, directly to them to allow them to give us a little introduction, because their titles, their awards, their books, their articles are so many, and podcasts for me to mention. So Katie, ladies first, something about yourself that we might not have talked about in previous episodes.
It was so hot the last time we talked. I know that you were in my apartment recording, but I don't know what we talked about. Probably Sardinia, if I had to guess.
Absolutely, yes.
Something you don't know, maybe I'm working on a new Rome book that is going to transcend the subject of cooking and delve into archaeology, topography, geography, politics, history, and a bunch of other subjects.
That is one of the reasons why I sent you that quick email. I say, Katie, by the way, I'm in Rome. Can we already start unearthing or sharing a little, spreading the seeds of what we should be looking forward to in the next few months? Yes, indeed, we talked about your Food of the Italian Islands book, and I have to say I have indeed used it many times to brush up on my Colurgiones recipes, Fregula, and many others with great success. You were also in Pittsburgh and a few other cities doing book signing and tours very successfully. And I think you were at the beginning of your publishing journey. So one of the additional titles that we can add is also full-fledged publisher, right?
Yeah, that's true. Parla Publishing is really real, founded in 2022, and got a bunch of titles that aren't my own coming out pretty soon.
Wonderful. So then this is the first time I have you on the Italian Radio Hour. I hope the first of quite a few in the coming. And you also come with a long resume of not only your very successful The Sportful podcast. It's not for foodies, it's for eaters. But your adventure into, I think it was maybe a 3-year-long journey into just throwing out in the air, I'm going to create a new pasta shape. You committed to it. You struggle and you came out victorious. You veni, vidi, and vici.
I venied, vidi, and vici'd.
Your Latin is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then now we have a very delightful and delectable, I think that's the word in English, cookbook, anything Pastable, 81 inventive pasta recipes for saucy people. But I would like for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what was then, who was then prior to all this big success and prior to the Sportful. Tell us everything you want to share.
Well, like Katie, I grew up in the great state of New Jersey.
Holler.
So you're outnumbered here, Viviana.
I see that New Jersey is the I think this is Katie, I'm quoting, the 21st unofficial region of Italy. Is that what you said?
Right. So we're both honorary Italians in that sense. Yeah, I grew up loving food, loving to eat, and when I graduated from college, my dream was that I wanted to host my own radio show. I worked as a radio producer for a number of years, but I had the bad luck of coming into the radio industry at a time that the whole thing was getting turned upside down with technology and recession. So I kept getting jobs on different radio shows, and they kept getting canceled. And then around in 2010, I launched my own podcast because I could kind of see that was going to be the future. But I figured if I own my own podcast, at least nobody can cancel it but me. But I'd worked mostly in like news, politics, some like news comedy stuff, in radio. And I was like, what would my podcast be? I didn't really think the world needed another guy with opinions on the news. And so I was like, well, what about food? Like I have this sort of quirky, idiosyncratic approach to food. And so I started the Sporkful podcast in 2010, back in the stone ages of podcasting, with the motto, it's not for foodies, it's for eaters. Mm-hmm. And in the very early days, it was just sort of about obsessing about the tiniest details of the eating experience, like what's the ideal surface area to volume ratio of ice cubes? How fast do you want your ice cubes to melt, depending on the beverage and the weather and the time of day and your mood. But it's evolved over the years and gotten into bigger subjects, and I think it has more depth to it now. We cover science, culture, history, economics, identity, all these things through food. And I set out a while back I thought it'd be a cool project for the podcast if I attempted to invent a new food. And yeah, I spent 3 years. I decided to try to invent a new shape of pasta because I think that a lot of the shapes of pasta out there aren't, I'm sorry, like they're good, but I just was curious if we could do better. You know, I have these 3 criteria that I came up with to judge all pasta shapes. So one is forkability. How easy is it to get it on your fork and keep it there? One is sauceability. How readily does sauce adhere to the shape? And one is tooth sinkability. How satisfying is it to sink your teeth into it? And I think a lot of pasta shapes are good at 1 or 2 of these things, but it's hard to find one that nails all 3. So I spent 3 years. A lot of things went very, very wrong, but I documented the process in my podcast, The Sporkful. And when it came out, we told the story in The Sporkful. The pasta launched and kind of succeeded in a totally insane way beyond my wildest dreams. And now it's in stores across America, and it's a real shape. It's called Cascatelli, which, as I'm sure you know, means waterfalls. And it's a short shape with parallel ruffles that hold a ton of sauce. And it's kind of crazy. I was just in Germany a few weeks ago to see it on display in a design museum in Germany that's doing an exhibit about pasta, and they included Cascatelli in it. So that was incredible. So it continues to kind of blow my mind that it's like all over the world, this thing that I sketched on graph paper that I bought at CVS. But yeah, it's pretty cool. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah, because we actually had the Sfoglini, because one thing, there is so much thought that goes into it. Also, the type of dye that is going to be used, who is going to make the dye, how many dye producers or whatever you want to call it are out there, trials and errors. So you persevered really, because 3 years is a long time. And so, I obviously had both the T-shirt with the 3 criteria, but I also had the boxes. Again, I do my own research independently. And so as many people really enjoy not only everything that you have said. And are these 3 words now in the dictionary? You pushing to get them into the dictionary?
That would be amazing. They're not in yet, although it's funny, that exhibit in Germany, they translated those words into German, which was very funny. I don't remember. It was like, you know how in German they like fuse words together to make really long words? They had like that version of like tooth sinkability, which was like translated roughly as something like, good to put your teeth on or something like that. But it was, it's people definitely got into those terms, and they're they do the job. They but like one of the things that was very challenging and why there were so many ups and downs is that I really wanted first of all, there have been like famous designers who designed pasta shapes, but it was always kind of like a gimmick. It was either like they just sketched it or they made one piece of it. They never really like had it mass produced. I wanted it to be like a legitimately great shape to eat, not just something that would look cool on Instagram. And I also wanted to be able to mass produce it and sell it and share it with all my listeners. So that created a lot of unique challenge, not unique to the world of pasta, but different from like just sort of if you wanted to do a one-off thing for fun. And it had to be able to be produced with a pasta die in a factory, and it had to be able to fit into a box and on store shelves and all of those things, which I assumed going in that the reason why there weren't more new pasta shapes out there was just that Italian food culture was too stuck in its ways. And what I learned when I went through the process is like, yeah, that may be part of it, but also like the typical way of producing pasta creates limitations on what you can do. You can't I could have 3D printed a single piece of pasta, but like if you actually want to get it made with dough that's going to taste good, there are limitations to what pasta dies can do.
Also, in addition to the Cascatelli, we were talking with this Sfoglini also about the quattrottini. I actually made some pretty cool wearable jewelry with it.
Yeah, you can. I actually talked to a company that makes jewelry as pasta shapes. We never ended up making it happen, but
yeah.
So Sfoglini, who are a great pasta maker in upstate New York, they make the original Cascatelli, and I also teamed up with them to make these two other shapes. Those two I didn't invent. They're like riffs on traditional Italian shapes. One of them they only make in Sicily and only during Carnival. There they call it Cinque Buchi, but we renamed it Quattrottini because it looks more like 4 than 5 to me when I see it. And then one is
like
Vesuvio. Right.
Right.
And so we have those available too, which are a lot of fun. It's fun that, as much as I love Cascatelli, life is too short to only eat one pasta shape.
That is going to be a nice slogan for another T-shirt.
Yeah.
Katie, you and some other experts also that I do respect have compiled a list of some of the, I don't remember if it is 24, 25 pasta dishes that was in the New York Times that people should absolutely try that allows people to go beyond the usual suspects. Can we talk a little bit about your personal contribution to the article and what you have shared with us, and other what is personal preferences or things that you have discovered along the way?
Yeah, so the Times reached out after interviewing a panel, including chefs who had selected their favorite shape and where to eat it. And I was asked to contribute the colorjones article. Colorjones are these stunning cheese and potato parcels that are pinched closed with a seam that looks like an ear of wheat. They're from the Ogliastra area, and they're one of those pasta shapes in Sardinia that has transcended its hyper local origins, and now you can find it elsewhere. Another is sufilindeu, which many people incorrectly state is a vanishing pasta that only have 3 people making it. That's absolutely not true anymore. It's definitely something that's produced all over the island, even in an industrial fashion. And so, I'm just going to be real with you. I was pretty skeptical about writing this colorjones piece because the chef selected a place that was not in the Ogliastra, and I was not really cool with that. I tried to change it. I was rebuffed. And so, I don't necessarily think that everything in food cultures should remain trapped in amber, but I feel like there are levels of expertise, and that maybe a style section of a magazine might not have food culture and the most interesting descriptions and explanations of it in mind when generating a pasta article. Those are my two duecentesimi on the subject.
Okay.
It was also kind of like a weird overall article. I don't know. I honestly don't get it. It's not one of the prouder moments in journalism for me. Let's put it that way.
That's fine. And you guys are going to go on this amazing pasta pilgrimage in tour of Italy in November together. So it's kind of going back to the crime scene for you then, right? Retracing some of the places where you have done some of your research, connecting with knowledgeable food experts to give the best experience. Let's talk about some of the research that you had done, some of the experiences that you are aiming to create for people coming on this pilgrimage, and then Katie I believe, Katie, you're going to be just on the Roman side, is that correct?
Correct, and I believe that one of my guides in the Parla Tours team, Arianna Pasquini, will be joining the group in Napoli.
Okay, wonderful. So let's have both commenting. So then you can start, and then we'll supplement with additional information straight from Rome from Katie.
Yeah. So just to back up a little bit. So when my pasta shape, when Cascatelli came out, it went viral. People all over the country, all over the world were cooking it, sending me pictures of what they're making, which was incredibly exciting and very gratifying. But there was a problem, which is that 75% of the photos that I was getting were tomato sauce, meat sauce, some kind of bolognese, mac and cheese, maybe pesto, basil pesto. And it made me kind of sad because, first of all, I feel like this pasta shape could go with so many more things. But putting aside my pasta shape, it just made me realize how limited the number of the pasta sauce repertoire is for many Americans. And even I myself kind of like, you fall into that red sauce rut. It's just like it's easy. It's so easy. It's so basic. Everyone knows it. Everyone likes it. And so I decided to try to write a cookbook of all non-traditional pasta sauces, or at least not well-known in America traditional pasta sauces. And so the result is my new cookbook called Anything's Pastable, 81 Inventive Pasta Recipes for Saucy People. And it goes far beyond Italian cuisine. It includes Asian, South Asian, Mexican
there. Yes.
Yeah. And tweak some classic Italian dishes. So we're doing cacio e pepe with chili crisp, or there's kimchi carbonara. There's a scallion oil bucatini with a fried egg on top, and you break the yolk, and the yolk runs down, and it gets all oozy and delicious. But of course, to do this, I wanted to go to Italy. I wanted to do research. And when I started talking to friends, everyone was like, you got to talk to Katie Parla. Like, she is the person in Rome. And for frankly, a good portion of the country, she's going to point you in the right direction. So I reached out to Katie. We became friends. I went to Rome. I just ate my way across Rome with Katie, which was an incredible experience. We had a blast. We ate very, very well. And, Katie is just so knowledgeable, and she knows her way around the city so well, and has great relationships with the restaurateurs and the chefs and the shops of the city, because she's put in that time and that hard work to develop those relationships and become so knowledgeable. I think sometimes the fact, when you're not born in a place, you actually can become more of an expert, because you can kind of come to it without baggage and also without bias. And I think that's part of why Katie's so good at what she does. And my charge to Katie was like, look, I'm doing a cookbook of non-traditional or off the beaten path pasta dishes. And what I want to learn about in Rome is like, where is innovation happening? Because so many people come to Rome and their image of Rome is like all the food is sort of sepia toned and very old world. And I said, so like, show me something else. And I mean, I'll throw it to you, Katie, but Katie, not only did she take me to places where there's real innovation happening, but it's innovation that's happening in line with Italian culture and tradition. It's not just people going for shock value. It's the natural kind of innovation that happens because people in kitchens are creative and they want to try new things. But she also blew my mind because it turns, I learned so much from her about the history of pasta that turns out not to be as static as I thought it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
we got into it.
Yeah. So tell folks about that.
It was one of the sweatiest pasta binges I've ever encountered. This seems to be the theme of the summer, like eating hot pasta, sometimes with chicken innards on it, in 95-degree temps. But yeah, I mean, I think like Rome, Italy in general is a place that when we sort of conceptualize it, particularly northeastern US-based people who have an Italian American context, we think of cuisine trapped in amber, we think of specific recipes. And now, like, quite frankly, we think of what we've seen on social media as being emblematic of the culture in general. And when innovation is happening in Roman cuisine, whether it's through like interesting sourcing or combining two existing flavors in a new way, that is exactly how the cuisine that we love and the classic dishes evolved. In addition to, of course, necessity and flavor. And I think it's so important, the work that you do and the writing that you've done to sort of showcase the way that we're in this evolution, and we have to, of course, acknowledge what came before it. But Romans have not been eating pasta every single day for 27 centuries, nor have the main ingredients in Roman cuisine be those, artichokes or tomatoes been the center of recipes for millennia. I mean, these are relatively modern additions, although of course ancient Romans had a form of pasta. Like the structured coursed meal, the specific dishes that we have come to know as distinctly Roman are the product of migration, evolution of cuisine, and not always people just trying to make the most with poor ingredients, sometimes using very high quality sought after ingredients and spices and merging those with things that are seasonal and available. So it's a lot more complex than boiling down a city's cuisine or a nation's cuisine to a series of sort of quaint platitudes. Do you remember what your favorite Roman pasta experience was?
I mean, it's probably Armando al Panteon, the gricia there, which I had not had gricia. Of course, I know carbonara, but like that is that and the aglio olio peperoncini was also insane, and just everything about it was perfect. I wouldn't change a thing about it, But I also remember that was the meal where you first explained to me that pasta was not the national food of Italy until about the past 100 years. There were many regions where it was hardly eaten at all, except for special occasions. And, and the idea that carbonara, which I think that most Italians and most Americans, I would have guessed that Julius Caesar was eating carbonara. But in fact, it was invented in the 1940s. I mean, like my parents are older than carbonara. And the recipe wasn't standardized for many decades. There was all different kinds of versions. The idea that like there is only one true carbonara and it will have these 4 ingredients and that is carbonara and any deviation is blasphemy is bullshit. Like that only like the Italians themselves only agreed on what carbonara is 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I also think when standardization becomes the centerpiece of a dish or concept, it's dying. It's no longer as relevant, with maybe the exception of like an Instagram post. But yeah, codifying something and trying to force it into a box that was never part of its origins, I think is a signal of having lost something. And you're absolutely right. This is a pretty young recipe, relatively speaking. Scholarship has shown that the first published article that references carbonara is actually a US based publication. And like in Chicago in like 1953 or something. And so and the recipes, the famous and important and landmark cookbooks that we look to, whether it's the Talisman of Happiness or a number of others, the sort of Cucina Italiana regional series, like when their editions, the very first editions that are referencing carbonara, they're using like alliums and they're using Gruyere, like freaking Swiss cheese, bro. Like you can't even suggest that today. People lose their minds.
There's a published recipe for carbonara from the 1950s or 60s that includes chopped clams.
That's a bridge too far, sir.
Right. But the point, Viviana, is that like, so, I think Katie and I bonded, had a great time on this, touring around Rome, eating, and, gave me a much deeper understanding for the not only the depth but the continued evolution of Italian food, and that really informed my cookbook. And I felt like it kind of gave me more license. Like I thought of my cookbook as like I'm sort of this outsider who's kind of trying to shake up a cuisine that's in danger of getting a little, getting some cobwebs on it. And what I learned when I spent time with Katie is that, in fact, just like basically every other cuisine in the world, Italian cuisine is dynamic. It continues to change and evolve. New ideas continue to emerge. And hopefully my cookbook is one small contribution to that, which to me, like maybe that's a less flashy way to frame your book, but like to me, it's more interesting and exciting. The idea that that like what's the next thing going to be? What will chefs in young people in Italy, young chefs and home cooks in Italy, how will things evolve in the next generation? I think it'll be really exciting to see, and like that's what keeps cuisine fresh. So so my book, and then I also spent time in Puglia. I spent time in Bari. I researched the origins of spaghetti all'assassina. And it went to the restaurant where it was invented in around 1960, went to other places there. I went to Lecce and met with the gentleman named Silvestro Silvestori, who you may have crossed paths with, who runs a cooking school there, and learned about other dishes native to that region that are really unknown, and mostly unknown in America. Included all that in my cookbook. And, the cookbook came out great, hit the bestseller list, very exciting. I'm very proud of it. And these folks at Culinary Backstreets reached out to me. They run food tours all over the place, and they have a great reputation for, like Katie, for like really spending time in areas, knowing the locals, not just taking you to the most touristy places. And they said, hey, did you ever want to do a food tour? And I said, what if we did a food tour that retraced the steps of my research trip across Italy for my cookbook, that goes to Rome and eat, like imagine the experience of getting to go to Rome and eat pasta with Katie in Rome. Go to Bari and go to the place where spaghetti all'assassina was invented. Go to Lecce and take a class with Silvestro Silvestori. And they said, yeah, let's do that. So that tour is happening this November. And if you go, you'll get to go to Rome with Katie, eat in Rome with Katie. And I'm going to be in Bari. I'll eat in Bari with you and take those classes in Lecce. So I'm excited to go back to all those places and eat all those foods again. And also excited to share that experience with folks on the tour. And there are 2 spots left. So there's a little bit of time. It's almost full, but if people want to squeeze themselves in, you can go to culinarybackstreets.com/sporkful. Sporkful is the name of my podcast. That's why it's that. But culinarybackstreets.com/sporkful and sign up and come hang out with Katie and me and eat in Italy together.
Okay, so
next time you go to Turkey, you got to check out the OG Culinary Backstreet City in Istanbul. Their tours are incredible.
Oh, I would love to do that.
Truly the best.
I was just in Berlin, which is like the next best thing to being in Turkey.
Oh yeah.
There are more indeed.
Yeah, it was crazier. It was crazier in Berlin when the Turkish national team was playing in the Euro soccer tournament than when the German national team was playing.
I can imagine. So let me just read a couple of messages and then we'll continue with our conversation. Applying for Italian citizenship, need documents translation? Istituto Mondo Italiano provides certified translations and assistance services. Be sure to visit us at istitutomondoitaliano.org and schedule your free consultation. Un caffè, per favore. My first cup of coffee sets the tone for my entire day, and I get my coffee at La Prima Espresso. La Prima has been brewing Pittsburgh's best coffee for nearly 35 years. Try any of their in-house roasted varieties of beans from all over the world at home, or come and enjoy an espresso or a cappuccino at any of their locations, where their friendly baristas and familiar faces will make you feel at home. Visit laprima.com to get La Prima Espresso coffee at your door. So yes, let's talk a little bit about that's the observations that sometimes I make while I'm traveling. We launched at Istituto Mondo Italiano just in the last 2 years, a couple of different programs. So one was Hidden Gems of Italy. So we kind of shared with our audience, at our facility, places where kind of more the Italians would go, and the history of some of the places that are not usually on the first trip to Italy itinerary, but definitely for the curious minds are just a train ride. And after that, because I had a friend of mine who was doing the presentations, and I was in my little corner just preparing a few little things, and these little things just became session by session much more elaborate. But then we started to do a regions of Italy cooking let's call it cooking club, but every month we would focus on a different region. And the people that came and are still coming to those events were either people that have gone to those regions and then they can recognize those flavors because they're not available in where we are in Pittsburgh, or people getting ready to go to Italy. And we wanted to kind of simplify their expectations on what to order when they go there, because it doesn't pay me, there isn't anything that pains me the most when you are in Venice and everyone is eating pizza. You're going to have great pizza in Venice, but they're missing out because that's the comfort.
Where? Tell me, Vivian.
I was like, I'm not eating pizza in Venice, so I can't, but I'm sure there are people doing stuff.
No, grazie.
So that's why, when, for instance, Katie had came up with the food of the Italian island. So it's a beautiful, just finally someone that is, first of all, writing also in English, because there are, publications, but usually it's just for an Italian speaking audience. And some of the places that she visited, I had been there as well, so definitely. But this is anything, that you guys are doing is really to elevate that conversation and kind of put people, it's like kind of connecting, making a bridge of, like, when you go there, like the Spaghetti all'Assassina, there is even a wonderful writer that has a novel with that title. I don't know. It's as I said, it's you're shedding both light, information to make that experience of Italy a little more truthful than again always going to the big cities and going to the places that Instagram tells you to go to. And even though I'm from Rome, all my students coming to Rome, they always ask me, where should I stay? And I always say, go onto the website, Katie Parla. So Katie, let's talk a little bit about what you've been doing, what you're doing, as much as you can disclose. Okay.
Oh, I mean, I'm the publisher. I can tell you whatever I want. I'm in charge. So the book that is currently Untitled Rome Book it's a portrait of the city with a heavy focus on the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries. I want to update people's information and general knowledge about what Italy is like today and how we got here. And it's very much influenced by the post-unification era, fascism, a chaotic post-war economic boom, and then financial crises that have defined the culture for the past 2 decades and have really shaped how we encounter the city and its food. So, remind me what quartiere you grew up in?
Piazza Bologna. So
okay,
near
so
the
Piazza Bologna, Monteverde, Centocelle, San Lorenzo, these neighborhoods are more than just your address, right? They are a way of living, a way of encountering archaeology and urbanism. And you can never really know Rome fully because it's impossible to live and really dig into each of those places. And so what Untitled Rome Book will attempt to do is sort of reveal the nature of these neighborhoods through the people, artisans, districts, and dishes and recipes and wine bars and historic businesses of each of those places, but also, framing the history of the city as it goes. So it's a little ambitious. It's going to be a lot longer than my average book, probably in the 430-ish page range. So I think a lot of people tell me I never cook from your books, I only read them. So I think those readers will be very happy because they'll be able to do a lot more reading than my standard 256 page cookbook.
Well, actually, for those of you that would like to see what anything might look like, this is my own renditions from Katie's book.
Gorgeous. That's very Sardinia focused. I like that very much.
Yeah. So, for instance, yes, I do read them and I do cook from them. But yes, an example, for instance, is Piazza Vittorio, because when my grandfather used to go and shop there, it was, first of all, an open market in Piazza Vittorio. And then I don't remember if it was in the 80s or the 90s, there was a theater there. The Apollo Theater was scheduled to close. So an orchestra director, a musician, decided that he was going to put an orchestra made of all the different new communities that were living in the area, put an orchestra together, have a big fundraising concert. These orchestra, obviously, with new members, still exist and they're still touring. And now Piazza Vittorio is no longer Piazza Vittorio. You have to go by the Termini station. And then you see a side of Rome that it's fascinating. You know, when I go there with my dad on a regular basis, sometimes he looks at things and says, what is that? Is that a vegetable? Is it a piece of fruit? But the city, you know, is slightly, you know, changing and adopting, again, new flavors and everything. So that translates into the cuisine as well, and the report with the ingredients. So having someone documenting that, we count on you, Katie.
Do my best.
It's pretty amazing. So then let's go back to you. Let's talk a little bit about your podcast. You both have podcasts. So we have Gola, we have Sporkful. How do you I don't know, what's your process in putting together an episode? I'm sure the criteria might be similar or different, you know. So you got quite a few recognitions then for your work. So tell us more about and all the platforms that people can listen to you.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, it's it's always a little hard to explain the Sporkful because we do so many different kinds of shows. I mean, we've been doing it for 14 years, and the show comes out every Monday, and I kind of like the idea that, like, even after 14 years, you're going to open up your podcasting app and, like, have no idea what the Sporkful is going to throw at you this week. It could be some sort of pretty in-depth journalism. It could be a story about some sort of forgotten piece of history. It could be a business story about, like, restaurants or the economics of grocery stores. I just taped an episode where I had talked to a married couple in South Dakota who's arguing over the way that they plan meals for the week and the criteria that they each have for when certain ingredients and cuisines can be repeated and how quickly so they don't get tired of them. So it's just sort of like silly debates. So we cover all different kinds of things, you know, and but you know, to me, that's what makes it still fun and still fresh. You know, and then I kind of always have to, like, look at our own website to remember what we've done, because I as soon as one episode's done, I'm, like, on to the next thing and focused on you know, on what's the next episode going to be. We do an episode every summer called Two Chefs and a Lie, where I have no prep and I just interview. I get to ask 3 different guests 5 questions each, and 2 of them are real chefs, and one of them is a liar who's making up a fake identity, and I have to try to figure out, and listeners play along, who are the real chefs and who's lying. And then we'll interview, you know, folks in the world of food, chefs, cookbook authors. So just recently we had Molly Baz on, and then we also did, like, a long form story about this guy named Ted Noy, who's known as the Donut King. He was a Cambodian immigrant who came to Southern California and basically launched the donut industry in Southern California. To this date, I mean, 90% of the independent donut shops of Southern California are owned by Cambodian Americans, and it all traces back to this one guy who became a multimillionaire running donut shops, and also helped a lot of Cambodian refugees in the late 70s and early 80s. Then he lost everything and disappeared. So we did this, like, extensive investigation of, like, what is where is he? Can we find him? Why did he disappear? And what is his legacy today? So that's kind of the Sporkful in a nutshell. I think that if you like to eat and if you're interested in stories and having a good time, that you'll enjoy it.
So at what point did you realize that the podcast had really taken off to the next level? At what point did you stop counting? 1 more subscriber, 2 more subscribers?
I guess we won our first, let me think, we won our first James Beard Award in 2018. So that was like 8 years in. You know, like I said, I started this Sporkful after getting laid off from a lot of jobs. So I kind of always, like, even for years and years as the show was growing, I always was kind of like, this could all fall apart at any second, you know, because I'd worked on so many shows where that happened. And when we won, you know, 8 years in, we won our first James Beard Award. And I was like, oh, like, maybe this isn't about to collapse. maybe this actually like maybe we're actually kind of like well known for doing some good work, and like maybe this is actually a bit of a like sturdy foundation. And so I think that that was when I first started to feel like, oh, okay, like this is really like this is something that's established. So that was very exciting. And now I'm 14 years in, and now I'm like an elder statesman. I got people coming up to me. When I did my book tour in the spring. I mean, I had one guy come up to me and said he's got a 17-year-old daughter, and she grew up listening to me in the back seat, the car. I had families coming out to some of my live shows, which is really with like the parents and their teenage kids, telling me that like the Sporkful is the only thing that their whole family can agree on to listen to in the car together. So that's awesome. I mean, that's amazing, and it's super gratifying. It's I think any creative person, you put stuff out into the world and you want to feel good about it, and you want to feel like it's resonating with some audience. But then to know that like the show has sort of become a part of people's lives, and especially now that it's been going on for so long, that it's like a part of people's like childhood memories, and now they're like people are growing up with it, is incredible. So it was really exciting and gratifying to be out on the road and to meet some of those folks in person and to hear those stories.
So how old are your two girls, right? Because they've been part of this, the past adventure and everything. So I believe you probably had them, filmed or being part of the experience. So tell us a little bit about their involvement, or it's like that, another story.
Yeah. So I should say first off, just to bring this all together, like, we produced a multi-part podcast series about the making of my pasta shape. We also produced a multi-part podcast series about the inside story, the making of my cookbook, Anything's Pastable, which I think will give people a new appreciation for how cookbooks are actually made. Because I think that a lot of, even people who buy a lot of cookbooks really don't have an understanding of what goes into them. And so both of those podcast series are available in the Sporkful feed now. The pasta shape one is called Mission Impastable. The cookbook one is called Anything's Pastable, like the cookbook. And my kids, as you say, Viviana, are integral parts of both of those series, as is my wife, Janie, who's sort of my skeptic in chief. She's a great character, and oftentimes skeptical of my crazy ideas, but then a great supporter in the end. And the kids helped test different pasta shapes. They had a lot of opinions. They helped test almost all the recipes from my cookbook, and you hear them in the podcast series giving feedback. They're brutally honest, which sometimes is hard to hear, but you need brutally honest recipe testers if you're going to make a good cookbook. And they are certainly that. And it's also cool. Like, I love that we have this sort of audio time capsule of, now from the start of the podcast, from the start of the pasta shape to the end of the cookbook is a 5 or 6 year journey. And you can hear them in the beginning of the pasta thing, they're little kids. And now I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old who are still full of opinions. Yeah, they're very funny. They both have a good sense of humor, and they're not afraid to tell me what they think. When I first attempted to make spaghetti all'assassina in my house, I burnt it like crazy, like too burnt. It was beyond picante, and the whole pan was
You
charred.
really killed it.
Yeah, it looked like I had pulled that pan out of some kind of, wreckage. And I called my 13-year-old and I said, "What does this look like to you?" And she said, "It looks like a cry for help."
It's funny because this is, the spaghetti all'assassino, at least, when I made it, it kind of started, it could be like a TikTok video, though it takes like forever because the pasta has to cook in the sauce, but something that you would never do, right? To put in the raw pasta in the sauce. You mentioned something about a making of a book. Katie, now you are the expert. Do you would like to share some opportunities and challenges of this journey? And would you, I don't know, I'm not, that's not my industry. Would you be publishing other people's books as well as a publisher?
You asking me or Katie?
Katie.
Okay.
I was going to ask Katie.
So currently nearly completed is the Angelini Osteria cookbook. The Angelinis are based in Los Angeles and have a nearly 25-year-old, at this point, institution, Italian restaurant. Angelini is originally from near Rimini, went to culinary school at age 13, and has been in the biz for almost 6 decades. And so this is a portrait of the Osteria and the sort of journey to this super successful business. My friend Danielle Glantz, who has a pasta shop in Gloucester, Massachusetts, Pasta Via Corta, her book is really, it's less of like a traditional cookbook and more focusing on the exquisite Italian artisan products that she finds in her shop, that she sells in her shop, and paired with the pastas that she makes from locally sourced durum wheat from upstate New York and Quebec. And that's much more like succinct. We're not going for the 50,000 words. It's more like 20 recipes with a shape paired with a sauce, and not quite chefy techniques, but the techniques that chefs employ for maximum flavor. And those will be out imminently. But we're about to go to print on McAtlas, which is Gary He's photo-driven social anthropology of McDonald's in the world. And not only is McDonald's the biggest restaurant in the universe, but I think it also can tell us a lot about our individual cultures, globalization, localization. And so it's this incredible document in which Gary spanned 5 continents and nearly 60 countries to investigate the hyper-local dishes, the customs that reveal something more than just a simple menu item, but a sort of universal truth about the culture of that place. And that'll be going to print in 10 days, which is kind of...
In bocca al lupo.
Congratulations.
Crepi lupo. And that's out in November.
Okay, so we are approaching the that I wanted to get one last comment, see whether it's dates, updates, websites, anything. We'll put those also in the show notes, but any words of pasta wisdom or food wisdom or how to stay cool. So then something from you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pasta is delicious all year round, no matter what the temperature outside is. And I hope everyone eats more pasta. There is a chapter in my cookbook of pasta salads, non-traditional pasta salads, which are great for the summertime and for barbecues. So yeah, I hope folks will check out Anything's Pastable. I'll be doing a lot more cookbook events around America and Canada, and going to London all in September and October, and then November to Italy, this trip where I'm meeting up with Katie. So you go to sporkful.com, you can find all my events, and the cookbook is wherever you get your cookbooks, and the podcast is wherever you get your podcasts.
Absolutely. And also the amazing team that is behind your podcast and your work. And for you, Katie, what was that line that you said, how are you feeling today? I said that we're going to recycle it during the show.
So if I open my door, I'm looking at my terrace door. If I open that door and walked out, it would feel like I was being bathed in rendered guanciale fat. That's how hot and thick the air is outside. But I'd like to use my last words to introduce a concept called al chiodo. We all know about al dente. It's pasta that has not been cooked until it's lost its toothsomeness. Al chiodo has been cooked less. It tastes great.
Okay.
It is absolutely on display fully in Naples and Campania. You can read all about al chiodo and al dente cooking in Food of the Italian Islands, which is available on my website, Amazon, and in select bookstores. You can find all my free travel advice about eating, drinking, and hanging in Italy and elsewhere on the City Guides page of my website. And I've been finally, after like 5 years of neglect, updating blog posts like the best pizza in Rome, where to eat and drink, where to sleep in Rome. And so you'll have lots of updated, and I stress, free advice. But if you want to pay me money, I also do tours in Rome.
And you should do one of those tours with Katie.
Yeah, it's we have had quite a few students that I have reached out to Katie in the past, and I had some of them toured with Katie directly, some others with her wonderful associates, and the feedback has always been stellar. So we keep on sending them. So
Grazie.
So unfortunately, our time together is up. Il Big Ben ha detto stop. It is time for us to say Arrivederci e alla prossima. We want to thank you for tuning in into the program. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any topics you would like us to address, please contact us at italianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube or where you catch your favorite podcasts. I would like to thank my guests, Katie Parla and Pashman, our sponsors, Istituto Mondo Italiano and La Prima Espresso. Until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.